They told Mrs. Eleanor Cartwright that a lady in mourning should not go to the slave yards. It was not considered proper. They said it did not suit a refined widow in black silk to stand where tobacco spit and cheap whiskey soaked into the dirt. But none of the women whispering behind their fans had a baby who screamed through the night until his voice broke, or a nursery that echoed with cries she could not calm. Her son Thomas was 3 months old and angry at the world. Nursemaids had come and gone, young hired girls and older housewomen, all defeated by his red-faced fury. "He wants what he has lost," the doctor muttered once while packing his bag. "Babies know when someone is missing. You waited too long to place him in another woman's arms." Eleanor had almost slapped him. She had not waited. Her husband Edward had ridden into a summer storm and never returned, thrown from a frightened horse at the far edge of the property. One moment he had been laughing in the doorway, boots muddy, promising to be back before supper. The next, she stood over a still body and signed papers she could barely see through tears. Now the house felt too large, too quiet in the wrong places, and too loud inside the nursery. Her son's cries clawed at her nerves like desperate hands. At night, as she paced the floor with him, she heard other sounds hidden beneath his wails, her husband's deep voice, her mother-in-law's sharp tone, and somewhere faintly the half-forgotten laughter of girls in the yard from when she first arrived as a bride, hearing rumors she had tried not to understand. "It is simple," the doctor's wife had said while picking a thread from her sleeve. "Go into town. Buy yourself a good nurse. There are always girls available. Country-raised, strong hips, good milk. The baby wants a breast, not a bottle." The word "buy" sat wrong in Eleanor's stomach. She had never stood on an auction block. She had never watched someone she loved dragged past one. The business of purchasing human beings had always been her husband's responsibility, carried out away from her sight. She told herself that made her clean. But 3 nights without sleep stripped that illusion away. When the baby's cries rose higher, when her arms trembled from holding him, when the bottle dripped uselessly from his tight mouth, she made a decision. The next morning she dressed in black and told the driver to prepare the carriage. At the slave yard, men looked up in surprise. A widow's veil among rough coats and broad hats looked like a crow fallen into a pack of dogs. The auctioneer tipped his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Mrs. Cartwright, an honor." "I need a nurse," she said before he could begin his speech. "Young enough to keep up with the house, strong enough to feed a child, clean, no drunkenness, no laziness." He spread his hands. "We have a few girls from a small estate being broken up. Sad business. The master died with more debt than land. God rest him. You may find what you need among them." They brought the girls out one by one, lining them on the block. Some were clearly too young, flat-chested and frightened. Others were older, their mouths set in hard lines that showed they understood what was coming no matter whose hands they ended up in. The third girl made Eleanor catch her breath. She was maybe 16, maybe 17. Hunger sharpened the bones of her face, making her age difficult to judge. Her dress hung loose, her bare feet were calloused, and her hands were rough from work. Yet she stood straighter than the others, shoulders back, chin held at a careful angle that was neither challenge nor surrender. Her skin was light brown, her hair tied back in a simple wrap. The auctioneer called her Rose. "Good field stock," he said. "Worked in the big house too. Strong as any boy. Could make a fine nurse, ma'am. She has rocked other folks' babies." Eleanor barely heard him. The girl lifted her eyes for a moment to scan the crowd, and in that brief second Eleanor saw something that caught her heart like a torn thread. Hazel eyes, not brown, not black, but a strange mixture. Green touched with gold. It was an uncommon color here. She had seen it in one man more times than she could count. Edward's eyes. She blinked hard, blaming the sun, blaming her lack of sleep. The girl looked away again, jaw tight. Still, the impression remained, like a ghost of her husband staring from a stranger's face. $10 to start, the auctioneer called. "Who will bid for the girl?" Men murmured, weighing their purses. Somewhere behind Eleanor, someone snickered something about her being good for nights as well as days. Her throat tightened. She thought of her son at home, tiny fists striking the air, face red, lungs straining. She thought of Edward's portrait in the parlor, eyes painted that same impossible color. "I will take her," she heard herself say. "Whatever your price is, I will pay it." Every head turned. The auctioneer's eyebrows lifted. "Well now, the widow has come to buy herself some peace. Very good, ma'am. Sold at opening bid to Mrs. Cartwright." Rose stepped down from the block, as if walking through a dream. Chains rattled as they unhooked her from the others. She did not look at Eleanor until a hand on her arm guided her toward the waiting carriage. Then, for a brief moment, their eyes met again. Hazel met Hazel. Something like recognition flashed between them and disappeared before either could name it. Eleanor told herself it was only imagination, a tired mind seeing what it wanted. She told herself the girl's eyes were just eyes, that many people shared colors and shapes without sharing blood. She told herself many things as the carriage rolled back toward the plantation, carrying a hungry baby's desperate need and a girl whose existence might rewrite everything Eleanor believed she knew about her late husband's life. The baby stopped crying the moment Rose held him. It should not have surprised Eleanor as much as it did. Women in town said hungry children could smell milk and comfort before a nurse even spoke. But the change was so sudden it felt like a trick. One moment Thomas arched his back and screamed red-faced in his cradle, little fists beating the air. The next Rose's arm slipped under him with practiced care, drawing him close to her chest. His wail faltered, hiccuped, then softened into a low, hungry whimper as his cheek found the warm curve of her neck. "There now," Rose murmured. Her voice was low and steady with a cadence that did not quite match the house or the town. Somewhere deeper in the country, Eleanor guessed. "Hush, little man. No need to shout the roof down. You have somebody now." Her hands were confident. She bounced him gently, not too much. When he rooted blindly at her shoulder, she shifted him with a small natural movement that told Eleanor how many babies this girl had soothed before. "Seems he knows what he wants," the old housekeeper, Mrs. Briggs, muttered from the corner, arms folded. Her face stayed blank, but her eyes missed nothing. "And you, Mrs., have got what you paid for." Eleanor bristled at the tone, but let it pass. Her attention remained on her son. For the first time in days his face looked peaceful, his tiny mouth slack with sleepy satisfaction. His fingers, which had clawed at the air all night, now rested curled against Rose's collarbone. "You may sit," Eleanor said stiffly. "Rock him there by the window. If he wakes, you will feed him. If he fusses, you will walk him. If he—" "I know, ma'am," Rose says quietly. "I have nursed plenty that were not mine." The words pricked something inside Eleanor's chest. Not mine. She watched the girl settle into the rocking chair by the nursery window, watched her body adjust naturally to the rhythm babies liked. The chair creaked softly. Forward, back, forward, back. Outside, the afternoon sun spread across the front drive and the wide steps of the house. Rose's eyes flicked once toward the view, and again Eleanor noticed that odd tightening around her mouth, like someone tasting a memory they had not expected. "You have seen a place like this before?" Eleanor asked, trying to sound casual. Rose hesitated. "Big houses all look nearly the same from a distance, ma'am," she said at last. "White columns, long porches. Hard to tell one from another if you only see them from the yard. But you have seen one," Eleanor pressed, "before your last place." Rose's fingers stroked Thomas's back in small absent circles. "I was little," she said. "Do not remember much. Just the smell of magnolia near the front path, the sound of a clock in the hall, a blue dress rustling when a lady walked by." Her hazel eyes drifted toward Eleanor's morning gown, then away again. "It is all mixed up now." Mrs. Briggs shifted, the floorboard complaining under her weight. Eleanor glanced at the older woman and saw something like a warning there, as if to say, "Leave this alone. We all live easier when certain questions fade away." But the question refused to fade. It had taken root the moment Eleanor saw those eyes on the auction block, and now every small detail fed it. Later, when Rose laid Thomas down and the baby slept with his mouth open, dreaming only of warmth and a full belly, Eleanor walked the quiet corridor alone. Her steps guided her not to her own room, nor to the study where Edward's papers still lay in stiff accusing order, but to a narrow staircase at the back of the house. The stairs led to the small attic room given to Rose, a space beneath the eaves that once held trunks and forgotten dresses. Now a straw mattress lay in the corner, a small table held a pitcher and basin, and a cracked mirror leaned against the wall. The window looked out over the side yard, where the magnolia tree spread its glossy branches. Eleanor paused in the doorway. Rose stood by the window, shoulders tense, hands gripping the sill. She had removed her head wrap. Her hair fell in tight dark curls around her face. "You should be resting," Eleanor said softly. "You will have a long night. Thomas sleeps now, but I do not trust him to keep such kindness." Rose, startled, then eased slightly. "I was only looking around," she said, trying to recall if I had ever been here before. "You think maybe you have?" The girl frowned, her brows pulling close together. "Sometimes when I'm not trying to think about it, things come back," she said slowly. "The way the stairs creak in that back hallway, the sound the clock makes each hour, that painting in the dining room with the man on the horse and the river behind him." Eleanor's skin tingled. "You saw that today at dinner." Rose shook her head. "I knew it was there before I even opened the door. I could feel it like I'd walked past it 1,000 times already." She turned fully toward Eleanor. In the fading light, her eyes looked almost golden. "They told me my first mistress cried when they took me," she said. "Said she begged and begged, but the master's people said it was better this way. Said they had to correct a mistake. I don't remember her face. I just remember a blue dress and a hand that smelled like lavender and ink." Lavender and ink. Eleanor's breath caught. She had always dipped her pens in the study and then gone straight to the nursery without washing, tracing her fingers over the carved patterns on the cradle's edge, smelling of paper and perfume. Her knees felt weak. She sat on the edge of the small bed before she could fall. "Your last master," she managed. "What was his name?" Rose's jaw tightened. "Mr. Harding," she said. "But that wasn't where I started. That was where I ended up, after they took me from wherever I was first. Do you remember any names from before? Anything at all? Think." Silence stretched between them. The magnolia branches brushed softly against the glass. "At last," Rose whispered, "I remember somebody calling a man Edward when he came into the room. And once, when I was half asleep, I heard another lady say, 'Cartwright's gone and lost his senses.' But I was little, Ma. M." She looked down at her hands. "Names slip away when you don't have anything to hold them to." Eleanor stared at her. The house felt like it tilted around them, old boards groaning as if carrying some new weight. "Supper, ma'am," Mrs. Briggs's voice called faintly from below. "Cook says, if we don't eat now, everything will be fit for hogs, not humans." Eleanor rose slowly. "Come down when you're called to the nursery," she told Rose. "If he cries for you and not for me, I want to know it." "Yes, ma'am," Rose said. As Eleanor walked down the back stairs, her hand trailed along the banister. Her fingers found the same nicks she had known for years. How many times had Edward run his hand along this same rail, on his way to some hidden room, to some secret life? She thought about the gossip she had ignored when she first married him. Planters' wives whispered about fancy girls kept in hidden cabins, about children with familiar noses and strange skin working in kitchens instead of sitting in parlors. She had told herself Edward was different. He was attentive, charming, always ready with a story. And then she thought of the night their son was born, of the midwife's worried frown, of Edward's absence, called away suddenly to the far fields, they had said, while she labored and screamed, of his return with mud on his boots and something guilty in his eyes that she had been too tired to read. At the dinner table, his portrait watched her from the wall, riding his horse along the river, as if nothing terrible had ever happened on his land. The painted eyes were the same color as Rose's, the same color as Thomas's when he opened them wide in the dark. Mrs. Briggs poured soup. "You look like you've seen a ghost, ma'am," she said quietly. "Are you sure going to the yard was the right thing?" Eleanor's spoon clinked against the bowl. "I went to buy a nurse," she replied. "I think I may have bought a confession." Mrs. Briggs's hand paused. The older woman's gaze flicked toward the nursery, then back. Something like reluctant sympathy softened her face. Sometimes the dead leave more than portraits behind, she said. We all know that. Some just don't like to say it out loud. Later that night, when Thomas woke with a thin, searching cry, Eleanor went to his room alone. She lifted him, walked with him, whispered the lullabies her own mother had sung. He squirmed and fussed, his cry rising too close to the old pitch that drove nails into her skull. She hesitated, pride and dread fighting in her chest. Then she went to the door and called down the hall. Rose. The girl appeared almost instantly, as if she had been standing just outside listening. Yes, ma'am. Eleanor held the baby out. Take him. The moment his body settled against Rose's shoulder, the crying changed. It didn't stop all at once, but it softened. The sharp edge faded. His tiny hand searched for the fabric of her dress, found it, and calmed. His cheek pressed against the hollow of her neck, like it remembered something. Rose closed her eyes for a brief moment. There now, she whispered. That's it. You know me, don't you? You know how to listen to a heartbeat that sounds like yours. Eleanor watched, feeling something crack inside her. Why does he look at you that way? She asked quietly. Like he's finally found what he's been calling for. Rose opened her eyes. They shone strangely in the lamplight. Maybe he smells what they took from both of us, she said softly. Maybe he knows we both miss the same man. Eleanor's breath caught. She looked from the baby's face to Rose, then back to the portrait in the hall she could see faintly reflected in the glass of the nursery door. The colors lined up in her mind like a terrible equation. Edward Cartwright, who had ridden out in storms. Edward Cartwright, whose temper they all walked carefully around. Edward Cartwright, who had walked these halls at night when his wife slept alone. And Rose, the girl who rocked her son like she had been born to it, with her husband's eyes staring back at her over the edge of a slave's dress. Eleanor did not sleep that night. After Rose settled Thomas back into his cradle, after the baby sighed once, clutched a fold of the girl's dress in his tiny fist, and sank into heavy sleep, the house felt quiet in a way that felt wrong. No wails, no pacing, just the ticking of the long case clock in the hall, and the slow creaking of the rocking chair, as Rose sat a little longer, watching the child's chest rise and fall. Eleanor stood in the doorway, hands gripping the frame so hard her knuckles ached. The lamp threw small circles of light across the nursery, the carved cradle Edward had insisted on ordering from New Orleans, the painted toy horse that had belonged to no child until Thomas, the curtains her sister had chosen as a wedding gift. All of it had been built on the idea of a life she thought she understood. Now, in the soft glow, that life looked like a stage set, waiting for someone to pull the backdrop down. Go and lie down, she told Rose eventually. You'll be no use to him if you fall asleep standing. Yes, ma'am, Rose said, rising carefully. She brushed a hand once more over Thomas's hair, then slipped past Eleanor, eyes lowered. The faint scent of milk and sweat and some cheap soap trailed after her, painfully familiar and entirely new. Eleanor sat in the rocking chair herself, though there was no child in her arms. She rocked slowly, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere below, a floorboard creaked under Mrs. Briggs's weight as she made her final rounds. Farther out in the quarters, a baby cried and was answered. A man coughed. A woman sang a low song. The sounds layered together into a rough lullaby. The heartbeat of a plantation that pretended to sleep while always keeping one eye open. By dawn, she had made up her mind. At breakfast, she did not eat. She sat at the end of the long table under Edward's portrait, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold, and waited until Mrs. Briggs came in with the morning accounts. Sit, Eleanor said. The older woman blinked. Ma'am, sit. I'm tired of talking to someone standing over me like a judge. Today we can be two women who have seen too much. Mrs. Briggs hesitated, then lowered herself into a chair halfway down the table. Her back stayed straight, but her face softened slightly. You know, don't you? Eleanor said. About him. About girls like Rose. About children with the wrong eyes and the wrong cradles. Briggs stared at her hands. I know what every woman on land like this knows, she said. That some men think walls and rings and vows are for certain doors only. They build other doors in the dark. They walk through those too, and you said nothing. A spark flared in the housekeeper's eye. To who, ma'am? To you when you were 20 and glowing. thinking this place was a storybook. To your husband who paid my wages, to your mother-in-law who would have called me a liar and whipped any girl I named. We all choose which truth we can survive. I chose keeping my tongue so I could keep these hands steady enough to help the ones who needed it. Eleanor looked away, shame and anger twisting together in her chest. All this time, she whispered, I told myself I was innocent because I didn't go to the yards, didn't sit on the porch when the overseer brought new people up from the road. I thought if I didn't see, I wasn't part of it. Mrs. Briggs's voice softened. You were young, and you were a wife, not a king. Even if you had shouted, the men would have closed ranks. That's how this world runs. Well, I'm not young anymore, Eleanor said, and the man whose name is on the gate is under the ground. So tell me plainly, is there any doubt in your mind whose child that girl is? The housekeeper met her eyes for the first time. No, ma'am, she said. Not with that nose and that temper, when she thinks nobody sees. And those eyes. I've seen your husband's look in many faces. Hers is the first that made me feel sorry for him. Eleanor let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Then, I am the stepmother, she said slowly, to a child who has been bought and sold like furniture. And my son, she swallowed. My son has a nurse who is also his sister. The word tasted strange and right at the same time. What are you going to do? Mrs. Briggs asked. There was no challenge in it, only weary curiosity. For once, Eleanor said, I am going to decide something for myself and not let men's mistakes do all the deciding. She found Rose in the garden later that morning, standing under the magnolia tree with Thomas on her hip. The baby was awake, blinking up at the branches, one fist tangled in a fold of Rose's dress. Sunlight slipped through the leaves in patches, painting his face in broken gold. You should not be outside without a shawl. Eleanor said more to announce her presence than because she truly cared about the cold air. His chest catches the wind too quickly. Rose turned, shifting the baby automatically so his weight rested more comfortably against her arms. He was restless inside, ma'am, she said quietly. Sometimes the fresh air calms him. Thomas kicked once, then settled again, content with the simple comfort of being held close. His eyes, Edward's eyes, moved between the two women. I have questions, Eleanor said, and I am finished pretending that I do not. Rose's shoulders stiffened slightly. Yes, ma'am. Did your last master ever talk about this place? About Cartwright land? No, ma'am, Rose replied. He only ever spoke about debts and the weather. But the man who sold me to him once called me that Cartwright mess when he was drunk. Her jaw tightened. He thought I could not hear him, and before that, Rose shook her head slowly. Just pieces of memory. A blue dress. A watch that chimed. The way my first mistress cried when they took me away. She smelled like lavender and ink. She looked at Eleanor carefully. You smell like that sometimes. Eleanor's throat tightened. She stepped closer, close enough to see the faint freckles across Rose's nose, the way one of her front teeth overlapped slightly, exactly as Edward's had. My husband, she said, choosing every word with care, was not the man I believed he was. I think you already know that, Rose said, her eyes flashing. I know he was a man in a big house, and I was a child they could drag through the mud. I know someone put a price on me when I did not have a voice. I did not set that price, Eleanor said more sharply than she intended. She forced herself to soften her tone. But I have benefited from the world that did. That is also a kind of guilt. Rose looked down at Thomas. He had grabbed one of her braids and was trying to chew on it. She gently freed her hair from his fingers. What do you want from me, ma'am? She asked. Do you want me to thank you for buying me instead of someone else? Do you want me to forget who I am? I want to know if you will allow me to do one thing right, Eleanor said quietly. For you. For him. She nodded toward the baby. For the man who left you both with his eyes, and little else. Rose studied her silently. The wind shifted, carrying distant sounds from the fields, the metallic clink of tools, a fragment of song, life continuing without caring about anyone's pain. You cannot change what he did, Rose said finally. You cannot change where I have been. You cannot change that on paper I belong to you. No, Eleanor agreed softly. But papers can burn, and people can move. Rose's breath caught. You are talking about freedom? Eleanor glanced back toward the house, toward the road that led into town and beyond it to other roads, stretching farther than she had ever allowed herself to imagine. I am talking about choices, she said. You may not want what I would choose. You may want to run so far that this place becomes only a story you tell to frighten other girls. Or you may— She hesitated, surprised by her own next thought. You may want to stay, to grow up in a house where no man will ever touch you the way he did your mother, to help raise your brother, not as a servant but as something closer to what you truly are. Rose's fingers tightened around Thomas's small body. He squirmed, then settled again, trusting her completely. And what would the town say, she asked slowly, about a mistress keeping her husband's bastard under her roof-like family? Eleanor's mouth twisted. The town already talks, she said. They talk when a husband dies, when a widow wears black too long or not long enough, when a baby cries too loudly, when the crops fail. Let them talk. I am tired of building my life around their whispers. Her gaze lifted to meet Rose's. If you stay, I will never call you into my room at night to ease my loneliness. I will never sell you to cover some foolish expense. I will never pretend you are anything less than what you are. The child of the man whose money built this house, and the sister of my son. That is not freedom. But it is not nothing. And if I go? Rose asked. Then I will help you, Eleanor said. The words frightened her even as she spoke them. There are people in town who know roads the law pretends not to see. I will give you money, clothes, and letters that may carry weight in places where my name still matters. I will tell anyone who comes asking that you died of fever or ran away with a man or anything else that keeps their boots away from your trail. The offer hung between them, heavy and fragile. Rose looked across the fields. In the distance, men and women bent to their work, small figures against the long green rows. She thought of nights in other yards, of rough hands grabbing, of whispers she pretended not to hear. She thought of the wagon that had taken her from the first house, of how her supposed fate had been decided by men who never once asked what she wanted. Now, for the first time, someone was asking her. I do not know enough about the world to run into it alone, she said slowly. But I know enough to say this. I will not be treated like a secret shame here. If I stay with my head high. If I go with more than the clothes on my back. Eleanor nodded once. Then stay for now, she said gently. Stay until you know which frightens you more, the road or these walls. When you choose, tell me, not him. She lifted her chin toward the portrait in the hall. He has chosen enough for you already. Rose released a slow breath she had not realized she was holding. Thomas fussed softly, and she shifted him with natural ease, patting his back until he gave a sleepy sigh. I will stay, she said quietly. For him. She looked down at the baby. It is not his fault where he was born, no more than it was mine. Eleanor's eyes stung. No, she agreed softly, it is not. From that day forward, the house changed in ways small enough that a visitor might not notice, but large enough that everyone living there felt the difference. Rose moved through the halls like someone half remembering a dance. She learned which floorboards creaked, which hinges groaned, which rooms held too much heat in summer and too much cold in winter. Mrs. Briggs watched her with a tired kind of affection, scolding when she was careless, protecting her when her temper flared. You cannot speak to every white person the way you think in your head, she warned. But you can think whatever you want. Just make sure those thoughts keep you safe, not sorry. At night, when the house finally grew quiet, Eleanor sometimes stood in the nursery doorway and watched Rose and Thomas sleeping together in the rocking chair. His small body sprawled across her lap, her head tilted back against the worn wood. They looked like a painting no one would ever hang in a parlor, a slave girl and a planter's heir, sharing a peace that ignored law and lineage. In those moments, the portrait of Edward Cartwright felt less like a tribute and more like a warning. His painted eyes followed her, but they no longer had the power to tell her what kind of woman she must be. Years later, neighbors would still talk, as neighbors always do. They would say the widow Cartwright grew strange after her husband died, that she spoiled a slave girl by keeping her too close. that she spoke too sharply to men who suggested she should remarry. They would never know the full truth. They would not know that in a back drawer Eleanor kept a folded scrap of paper with two names written side by side, Thomas Cartwright and Rose Harding, and beneath them in trembling handwriting, simply brother, sister. They would not know that one spring, when rumors of slave catchers grew louder and the air felt wrong, Eleanor pressed a small pouch of coins into Rose's hand and said, "If you go, go tonight. Take him if you must. I will say, I woke to an empty cradle and an empty room. I will cry for you both in front of anyone who asks, and I will mean every tear." What they would know, what the ledgers and church books would record, is that Thomas Cartwright grew up pale and thin with his father's eyes, and some eyed his mother's stubborn spirit. That the nurse girl on the property never married, never appeared on any bill of sale after a certain year, and seemed to come and go like wind through the magnolia trees. As for Rose, the story you heard tonight follows her only to the edge of the property line. Whether she stayed and slowly reshaped the house around her, or walked down that long road and disappeared into freer air, is a choice she earned, a choice bought with years of pain, and one widow's late imperfect courage. What does not change, in any version, is this. A woman went to the slave yard hoping to buy peace for her child, and instead found a map of her husband's sins written across a girl's face, and for once, she did not look away.